All that matters is matter. 21 choices for better life, health, and wealth. Preview. I thank you for purchasing or downloading this preview to All That Matters is Matter, 21 choices for better life, wealth, and health. I am interested in sharing with you a true path to a better Africa and a better you, so some of it may seem controversial and irresponsible. I need you to read with an open mind. I will advocate for science but also elitism, marriage but also colonialism, parsimony but also tribalism. I am bringing knowledge unlike anything you've ever read, and it is free. If you like it, please consider a donation. I am currently working in Tanzania, so anything you send will be substantial. This is a free preview because I have only written the first 3 paragraphs of each of the 21 choices. As of this release, I am still writing, so feel free to message me on Discord, YouTube, X, or email. My socials are listed below. Cash App, ABSONI YouTube, The Pro-Black Perspective X at Onitaset Discord, Pan-African Discussions email, o1954@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Onitaset Kumat, author of The Book of Power. Choice 1, be materialist, as all that matters is matter. Everything that can experiences 2 worlds, the world and their world. One world is real and of matter, the other world is imaginary and of mind. All that matters is matter, therefore the mind, the imagination, is best used for matter, reality. This is what is meant by materialism. Life is not imaginary, it is real. Health is not imaginary, it is real. Wealth is not imaginary, it is real. Choose to go along with your imagination only when real material gains are possible and probable. This choice may be challenging for you, as you may have encountered beliefs in a world beyond the world, a world after the world, a world where the world is left behind. Those are comforting. But they are imaginary. There is no afterlife for humans, except that we can live on materially in our offspring. Therefore, when life ends, we end. And we know this because while we tend to imagine a difference between mental and physical activities, mental activities are in fact physical. Thinking is really the brain moving, and when the brain stops, so does thinking, and so do you. There is no you outside of your physicality. You are you, and you are the body. The mind is only the tool of the body. You may wonder then, what of the ancestors and what of the gods, the NTRW, the Orishas, the Abuzum, KWK? You may have experienced, or come to experience, at the passage of a loved one, a visit where they are older and wiser. You may also reason that because the universe is something, it came from something which may have came from something which may have came from something, and ultimately, up the line, that something is a being which thinks like you or better. But you also know, deep down, that all of that is only your imagination. You had ancestors assuredly, but there are no gods. You receive no visits, and the conclusion that an immaterial being created the material world contradicts your logic that material originates in material, a logic you would have imagined. Choice 2, be territorial, as all known life depends on one planet. The cosmos is vast. At minimum there are 2 trillion galaxies, and a galaxy may typically comprise 200 billion stars. So the Sun, the source of the majority of external energy on our planet, is only one star of more than 200 billion trillion. And you, and everything you experience, occurs on a tiny rock orbiting that tiny star. All life you know or may ever know depends on that one planet and that one star, and only the planet is livable. To exist better, it is incumbent that you choose to protect, develop, and share a territory on that one planet we call Earth. For you require energy to live, and unlike plants, you cannot directly produce energy from the sun for your survival. You gain energy, instead, by consuming plants, insects, or animals and their byproducts, and if you do not consume energy, eventually, you will die. Therefore, land is the basis for survival. It is through the land that plants grow, and it is through plants that all other life is sustained. The earth precedes humans by billions of years, but humans can imagine owning it. Ownership isn't real, but it can be enforced among humans. Like all other animals, humans do not intrinsically respect property rights or any rights. Rights are imaginary. Humans respect power, but only certain humans to a certain extent. For power is also imaginary. So certain humans cannot share in the imagination of power, they can be mentally compromised, mentally underdeveloped or mentally unwell. And certain humans will not share in the imagination of power, they can subjectively be revolutionaries or rebels. Often this conflict of imagination results in real consequences to life, death, injury, exile, imprisonment. Therefore, in any given territory among humans you must either be powerful or live at the whim of the powerful. To the extent that you can, choose a territory where you can either be powerful or agree with the whims of the powerful, and you will live your best life. Choice 3, be parsimonious as the wealthy buy necessities first, money second and luxuries last. The rich do not get richer, the thrifty do. For everyone who lives above their means is likely to lose their savings, and everyone who lives at their means is unlikely to increase their savings, but whomever lives below their means will increase their savings. Savings do not make wealth, but investments can, and savings can make investments. To be wealthy, you must choose to buy necessities first, money second and luxuries last. This parsimony is how England surpassed Spain, America surpassed Brazil, the socialists surpassed the capitalists, and how the Africanists can surpass the Eurasianists. Before the modern era, it was reasoned that the three wealthiest nations in history were Egypt, India, and China. They had three commonalities: a focus on agriculture, a focus on manufacturing, and a lack of focus on foreign trade. All three preferred for foreigners to export their surpluses in exchange for rare metals like gold and silver. On a territorial scale, Egypt, India, and China practiced the parsimony outlined. By producing their own necessities foremost and their own luxuries, they mostly only bought money from foreigners, by selling their surpluses. In the modern era, this sort of independence isn't universally practical. Manufactured goods of today are more complicated, requiring more minerals and metals from different parts of the world. Nevertheless, most nations which focus domestic agriculture and manufactures thrive over those which focus foreign agriculture or manufactures. The exceptions follow the law of gain. Not everyone can participate in agriculture or will participate in manufacturing. This is true for nations as well as people. But nearly everyone can buy money. Money is humanity's tool for navigating markets, where markets are where humans exchange goods and services. The law of gain is how one can best profit from markets. Buying in the cheapest market and selling in the dearest describes the fundamentals of monetary gain for nations and people alike. It can be augmented politically, and this is the basis of economic policies. Tariffs, for instance, are extra taxes on foreign goods to reduce their cheapness in domestic markets. While they have the nominal benefit of greater revenue to the state, they have the political benefit of increasing domestic market development. Just as states must be political in their exchanges to increase their development, so must you. Whether you buy money by selling goods, selling services, or selling your labor, politically using the law of gain and parsimony will benefit you in the long run, as it has the English, the Americans, and the socialists. Choice 4, be partied as only one ideology advances your well-being. Disagreements are imaginary but can have real consequences. It is because of this that humans need governments. For all disputes can be easily settled with violence, so governments minimize violence by monopolizing it. Therefore, there are three states in which humans can live based off of the monopoly of violence. The earliest state is statelessness. This is a pre-monopoly state. While it can be a utopia, it is anarchy. It is the power vacuum in which individuals will vie for a monopoly. When that monopoly is achieved, the state can be either a monarchy, a system whereby one individual and their subordinates are the arbiters of violence, or an oligarchy, a system whereby a group of individuals will be the arbiters of violence. The oligarchy is the state that most humans live in, oftentimes unwittingly. Because there is an overclass, instead of only an overlord, there can be disagreements among them consolidated around ideologies and political parties. There are four fundamental ideologies, of which so-called capitalism and communism are two of the three incorrect ones. Therefore you should seek to be partied, as only one ideology advances your well-being. The purpose of politics is to protect and develop the economy, namely the markets of a territory. The monopoly of violence protects markets, but ideology develops it. It is reasonably assumed that communism, namely socialism, is the best ideology for the development of a people. The example of Lenin and the USSR showcase this. While initially deprived and impoverished, the USSR, through its pursuit of communism, surpassed even the US, the then foremost nation on the planet, in several important metrics, including, and most notably, in industrial capacity and scientific know-how. It was the Soviets, not the Americans, who first put a human into space. Lenin summarized communism as Soviet power plus the electrification of the whole country. Total electrification was the key to the USSR's success, but Soviet power, namely decentralization, was its detriment. The four ideologies are permutations of Lenin's summary, namely, is it centralized or decentralized, and is development urban exclusive or rural inclusive. Communism, ideally, is decentralized and rural inclusive, where capitalism, if it's considered an ideology, is centralized and urban exclusive. These two have their flaws. Communism's is the ideality of decentralization, organization is oligarchy, or more specifically humans best operate in hierarchies. From our families to our nation, we are hierarchical. Decentralized power is counterproductive as it plays against information asymmetry, the potentiality for meritocracy, and the advantages of centralization. For what it's worth, the USSR's leader after Lenin, Stalin, did away with any illusion of the viability of Soviet power. Not surprisingly, it was Stalin's USSR that surpassed the US. On the other hand, capitalism's flaw is its urban exclusivity. All territories are divided into rural and urban settlements, the country and the town. While the country is where agriculture, humanity's lifeblood, is most pursued, most governments around the world are centered around towns. In fact, most humans live in towns. Towns are where markets and market routes intersect. Capitalism focuses on towns because towns are where profits are made. The trouble with the focus on profits is most benefits are very indirect and coincidental, and this asymmetrical development necessitates extreme economic impoverishment of the many. If capitalism is centralized urban exclusivism and communism is decentralized rural inclusivism, we arrive to our only viable ideology, centralized rural inclusivism, nationalism for short. Choice 5, be gendered as men are the fence, women are the garden, and children are the produce. Parenting a child is developing a child to be a parent. In this way, a good parent keeps a child alive into adulthood, trains them in good health practices, readies them for wealth accumulation, and steers them toward becoming good parents. Though all children are children, their sex is a biological difference that informs what they ought to become. So the boy ought to become a productive man and the girl ought to become a productive woman. This is optimized in gender roles. Some discourage gender roles, but you must choose to become gendered. For in gendered societies, men are the fence, women are the garden, and children are the produce. When you choose this arrangement, you benefit yourself and your future generations. Men and women differ on a chromosomal level. Generally, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes and one pair determines sex. That pair can either be two X's for women or an X and a Y for men. This difference is microscopic, but they are instructions for a human's physical development and intrinsic societal value. A human, like all animals, must do one thing: consume. At the most basic level, humans consume, and they consume daily. Humans also, unlike many other animals, are born helpless. While solid foods are the staple for most human diets, newborn humans are severely limited in their digestive abilities. Rather, a newborn is optimally fed by their mother's breast milk, so, beside from a mother being physically impeded for around 9 months, for an additional 6 months at minimum, she can optimally feed her child daily through breastfeeding. Ideally, she would gradually introduce solid foods after 6 months but continue to breastfeed between 1 and 3 years for the child's best early cognitive development. This means that a woman who is actively invested in human reproduction and her offspring has a domestic need different from a man who is actively invested in human reproduction and his offspring. This difference informs gender roles. Men and women are complements and they are individuals that must consume but also be protected and nurtured. Individually we are born helpless and, outside of technological advantages, against human groups we remain so. As such, men and women need to occupy different social roles in order to optimize their lives. The roles that most differentiate men and women are the roles of protector and nurturer. All humans ought to protect or nurture others, but in an ideal family or an ideal society, men are the primary protectors and secondary nurturers and women are the primary nurturers and secondary protectors, children are tertiary. That is, if a house has an intruder, every present man should confront the threat before any woman does, and every present woman before any child does. This expectation is extended to nations and war. Similarly, when a human is rendered helpless, as we occasionally are and naturally tend to become, their care should fall first to the women, who will be most experienced by training, followed by the men and followed by the children as a last resort. This gendered living allows for more and better protection and nurturing among families and communities. It also informs the formation of family units. Choice 6, be racist as genetic extinction is preventable but probable. The human species, Homo sapiens, are bipedal primates, or hominids, which evolved in Africa around 200,000 years ago. At that ancient time up until around 40,000 years ago, there were other hominid groups that populated the earth. Those other hominids, like the Neanderthal and Denisovan, are extinct today, partly because of prehistoric human activity. Therefore up until recently, other hominid species competed with humans for survival and ultimately we won. Or did we? The human species can be further classified into subspecies or races and there is a pressing need to do so. The human is the last remaining hominid on Earth, all others are genetically extinct. But some humans share ancestry with the very hominids their ancestors partly brought to extinction. This fundamental difference classifies the races as different humans descend from different animal hybrids while some don't. This isn't inconsequential. Throughout history, these hybrid races, which originated in a form of genocide, have waged genocidal wars against one another, against other races and even against other species. Some of the earliest writings by humans document this. As it was encouraged to our forebears it is encouraged to you, choose to be racist, as genetic extinction is preventable but probable. 200,000 years ago, the human species had only one major race. 500 years ago, the human species had 5, today, the human species has 3, which, if any, will survive 500 more years. The history of the races is the most important study. Humans begin in Africa and for over 100,000 years they remain there. Around 70,000 years ago, some left the continent by way of Egypt and Somalia and encountered other hominid groups, namely the Neanderthal to the west and the Denisovan to the east. Archaeological evidence is limited, especially on Denisovans. Some speculate that war with the other hominids led to their extinction. Others speculate that humans became prey and eventually predators. The only certain conclusion is this. Within 30,000 years, the Neanderthals and Denisovans were no more and humans populated Europe and Asia respectively. These humans carried admixtures from the earlier hominids, they were the Eurasians, the Europeans, and the Asians. These three races, the African, the European and the Asian or the original, the Occidental and the Oriental, are coincidentally the three remaining major races of today. The next two are the Australian and the American, Two prominent migrations out of Asia that populated land masses disconnected from Africa. Up until 500 years ago, they existed as major populations. By some estimates, the indigenous Americans boasted some of the most population-dense cities in the world. Then the Europeans invaded. Within 2 centuries of European contact, the indigenous Australian and the indigenous American, 3 continents in total, were effectively reduced from flourishing to extinction. Their territories were colonized by Europeans and remain colonized with few exceptions. Many Africans and Asians were likewise colonized. Some estimate that as much as 2/3 of Africans were wiped out. Africa has since recovered by population, but diverse languages, cultures, and genetic lines are lost forever. Asians have also suffered, but some, especially the Chinese, have adopted the mindset to never lag behind other races again. Today the European seems less genocidal. But only when one looks at words. Imagination overworks reality. Many prominent European nations stockpile nuclear weapons and entertain genocidal tactics like mad, mutually assured destruction. Many European nations also ignore the threat of global warming, the consequence of increased pollution on global temperature averages, partly because it's disproportionately genocidal on equatorial races like Africans. Many European nations also preach global unity and anti-racist religions, then through internationalist organizations like the United Nations and the World Bank, orchestrate genocidal and racist tactics on anti-racist and non-racist nations. Racism is the only protection against genetic extinction. This was known by Eurasians and Africans in even ancient times. As genocidal technologies advance, it's more important than ever to understand this fact of history. The historical record of India, Egypt, and Congo exemplify why you should choose to be racist. Choice 7, be nationalist, as nations are mutual aid societies for racial elites. In any territory there are 2 classes, the overclass and the underclass, the rulers and the ruled, the elites and the commoners, the nation and the population. This is not a choice, but an instinct of the human species. Humans are born as dependents, and never truly become independent, as they'll always depend on nature to sustain them. The best a person can become is interdependent, necessary to the functioning of a greater society. It is a cruel reality, but most humans live and die as dependents. Only a few, the elites, achieve interdependence, and their societal rewards are greatest. To truly profit in life, you must choose to be an elite or a partner of an elite. This aspiration is nationalism, for nations are mutual aid societies for racial elites, and the quality of your citizenship is comparable to your societal value to elites. Your first and most important choice is to choose a nation in which to be an elite or a partner of an elite. You can always choose again or choose another, but do not take this choice lightly. The good you can do in this world is limited by your proximity to elites. Elites write the laws that commoners abide by. They control the flow of wealth in a territory, and they determine who else will be an elite. Your choice in a nation should factor in your larger goals. The most important factor is your race. Every nation is racist, and necessarily so. All elites, to be efficient, should be racist. The strongest nations in the world are ruled by one race, the weakest, foreign races or race traders. Races can share territory, but they cannot share power. Your ambition should always be power or proximity to power, and in any territory, no organization is more powerful than the nation. You can try your luck in another race's nation, but only with your true nation in mind. If you aim to extract secrets or resources, you must have an extraction point and an escape plan. The nations of the world, the elites, command armies, order arrests and contract assassins. Remember, they are not only above the law, they are the law. Your second factor should be the language you wish to speak. Kiswahili has long been the choice for a Pan-African language, but only 4 nations of 54 consider it a national language. You can choose to learn any number of languages, you may even already know 8, but it is imperative that you choose a nation that uses a language you speak or aspire to speak. You will never be able to understand everyone in every part of the world, but you can understand many people in a territory by learning the language of the many. More importantly, you will want to learn how to engage the law and the law enforcement. Ignorance of the law is never an excuse. Moreover, the ability to read and write contracts and interpret communications for yourself is an underrated privilege. Lastly, language discerns character. Without language, you cannot differentiate the intelligent from the stupid or the wise from the foolish. As your objective is power, you should make it a point to choose where you can discern the hopefuls from the hopeless. Choice 8, be local, as good community is good homes, good jobs, good markets, and good schools. Humans generally live in 4 places. For older adults, their primary is their homes, their secondary is their jobs, and their tertiary is their markets. For children and young adults, their secondary is their schools. These occasionally conflate. One can work from home, request deliveries, sell in the markets, or even homeschool. The 4 places together, their neighborhoods and the people within, can be considered a person's community. However, many people adopt a wider community: family, friends, colleagues, and even entertainers like athletes, commentators and celebrities are oftentimes perceived as community too, sometimes at the neglect of one's 4 neighborhoods. For a better life, choose to be a local to a good community. A good community is good homes, good jobs, good markets, and good schools. These 4 should be a priority over both the wider community and any outside community. The primary community for most people is the residents of their homes, their frequent guests, and their neighbors. This is the community in which you sleep and the community in which your immediate family sleeps. Because of this, it is the most important community to secure. Home security starts at home, but it extends beyond your house. Coordinating with your neighbors and keeping abreast with your neighborhood watch is a great first measure to securing your home. A better first measure is a gated community along with full-time security guards. Although a luxury, many home vulnerabilities are mitigated by gates. Another underrated security measure is being mindful of whom you invite into your home and who actually knows your address. Even without entering your home, you are vulnerable if, for instance, someone ambushes you on your commute, your travel, or even your garbage disposal. Keeping your address unknown isn't too practical, but it can be made difficult to attain for would-be stalkers. Home cameras within and without your house and other technological aids are additional supplements to consider. As well, deeply consider your need for access to electricity and clean water. The most important technology, though, is a weapon. The type of weapon will vary depending on the laws, but it is better to have and not need than to need and not have. Secure yourself with the best weapon the law allows in your home. The secondary community, for adults at least, is the job. This job takes different forms for different economies. In a hunter-gatherer economy, it may be a hunting ground; in a nomadic herder economy, an open field. In an agricultural economy, it could be a farm, but in industrial and post-industrial economies, it can be mines, workshops, factories, docks, plants, offices, shops, and the like, anywhere that contributes to manufactured goods and their distribution or related services. The glaring reality for most people is how underindustrialization in industrial and post-industrial economies means mass underemployment and is effectively a pre-industrial economy. For this reason, in many pre-industrial economies, many people are without secondary communities. The circumstances are so dire that many engage in economic migration at great costs and great risks. Those who do not migrate may engage in petty crimes, oversaturate low-access services, or worse, peddle flesh. Depending on how industrialized your nation is, you may not find a job yourself. Fundamental for you is to secure a good job, even if that means creating a job for yourself. Then, for the good of your community, create local jobs as well. Job creation is the biggest deterrent against the vices of economic migration and brain drain, as well as petty crimes and prostitution, and done right, it is an efficient and socially good way to increase acquired capital. It is often complained that jobs exploit labor. Take little heed to that complaint. Paying people enough to increase the social welfare of your community and to replenish your invested capital and reward you with more is your greatest community work. Do not underpay people, but paying people enough to come to work tomorrow is better than paying them more or paying them less. Choice 9, be married, as marriage can fulfill your most selfish and selfless personal needs. Man is half and woman is half, the two are complements and therefore complete each other. They pair for recreation and reproduction, the two potential outcomes of sex. Sex can fulfill the selfish need for physical catharsis, a requirement not entirely unlike food or water. Sex can also fulfill the selfish and selfless need for genetic survival, by creating offspring that carry on a genetic imprint. The latter function, reproduction, temporarily compromises a woman, causing her to become increasingly dependent on others. After giving birth, she may be differently compromised, as her child, like all humans, is born dependent and in need of long-term assistance. We call this assistance family. Marriage is a commitment between a man and woman for long-term assistance. Choose to be married, as marriage can fulfill your most selfish and selfless personal needs. But be very careful with this choice, as marriage can also be unfulfilling of any personal needs. You should discern this potentiality even before you engage in sex, as sex can result in pregnancy, but there are many ways to prevent this. All marriages are between two people, but each person can marry more than one person. This would be a plural marriage. Many plural marriages comprise men who marry more than one woman, especially when the man has greater access to wealth or when a woman is infertile, widowed, or not producing sons. Although singular marriages are the historical norm, both marital patterns are solutions for the personal need of long-term assistance. In either marriage, of course, you choose a partner, and that choice can be very right for you or very wrong for you. The first step in making a good choice, though, is being a good choice. This may differ across societies but always differs for men and women. Generally, to be a good choice, you should be healthy. If there is anything you should never overlook about a person, it's their physical health. No one who is unhealthy will dedicate themselves to your health, and if you are unhealthy, you should dedicate yourself to your own health. In good health, you are therefore more helpful in a marriage, and you will also be as physically attractive as you can be. Your physical attraction is imperative for a good marriage. But remember that no one is physically attractive to everyone, as no body type is universally favored. Your ambition should be to naturally achieve the physically best body you can maintain and personally adore, that is, your real body in good health. This is especially important for women, as childbearing is potentially fatal for them, and is more so when a woman isn't in good health. Because women are always compromised by children, being wealthy makes men a good choice, where wealth isn't as required for women. Choice 10, be oligarchic, as organization is oligarchy. No one is equal and no group of people is equal. While humans differ genetically, groups of people differ in how they organize, technologize, and strategize. The people who do these three best are better off in the world. The people who do not do these three are worse off. Organization, technology, and strategy are how a people win over another. A good example is technology being minimal and size being equal. 3 people can overcome 20, as long as the 20 approach one by one. Since size being equal, 3 people can overcome 1, 20 times in a row. If technology favors the 3, the victory is only more decisive. This example may seem unrealistic, and yet minority domination is the norm of human societies. A police force rarely outnumbers civilians, an army rarely outnumbers a nation, and even a prolific father, as head of household, is rarely challenged by all of his sons at once, let alone the whole house. Dependency at birth, again, informs us that humans are intrinsically hierarchic. But as human organizations become larger, it is shown, due to our communicative limitations, that humans are more precisely oligarchic. You're already oligarchic, but choose to be oligarchic too. Many try to dissuade against oligarchies, but if you are to organize and be victorious in life, you must understand that, at scale, organization is oligarchy. There is a relationship between organization and technology and strategy. Simply, organization is how a people use technology and strategy. Oligarchy, or minority rule, then, is the best strategy people can use to organize their technology. The reasoning is clear: humans are never equal, neither in access to information nor the interpretation of information, yet the use of technology can drastically differ between users. This limitation and reality requires, especially on a large scale, that information is centralized among the best available interpreters of that information and exclusively among those who have the organization's interest in mind. This can be explained in another example. Suppose you have a territory with 4 borders, for simplicity: south, west, north and east. To the south is a nation, to the west is another, to the north is yet another, and to the east is the ocean. The territory can follow different organizational schemes, so contrast a democratic, a republic and an oligarchic nation. Suppose each border has its own particular and popular issues. To the south is a growing military threat, to the west is a destabilized but resource-rich nation, to the north is good trading opportunities, and to the east, offshore drilling. The budget of the nation is limited. In a democratic society, where the majority rules, the issue that would be focused may be the issue where the population is concentrated. Suppose the population is focused in the east because of the port city. The budget of the nation doesn't go to the southern border that no one in the east knows or cares about, but it goes to offshore drilling. A republic, a representative government, which is a cross between democracy and oligarchy, may similarly opt for the offshore drilling, but because of the centralization of information, potentially put up defenses to the south. The oligarchy, where a well-informed minority rules, may altogether neglect the offshore drilling and possibly dabble in resources to the west or catch the real threat to the east, an approaching navy, an unpopular, largely unknown issue communicated secretly to the oligarchs. The oligarchs see the navy where the majority will not, even if they are in the east, because it will have an effective information-gathering network, or spies, reporting to the handful of trustworthy individuals in power. The oligarchs may then end up putting resources in an opposing navy rather than losing the resources with a drill when a foreign enemy enters unopposed. Choice 11, be technologic, as humans have always augmented their power with nature's. We are the last hominids. The first hominids roamed the earth over 4 million years ago. A descendant of theirs, Homo erectus, roamed 2 million years later. They had a then unique trait: they used tools and they used fire. They were technological. While many other animals today use tools, mostly sticks and stones, these hominids, and their descendants like us, remain unique in their use of fire. Fire is among the most dangerous of the common chemical reactions in nature. Yet even early hominids, long before humans walked the earth, learned to use nature to improve their lives. This is our inheritance, this is our true power. Choose to be technologic, as humans have always augmented their power with nature's. In the 2 million years since Homo erectus, technology has far advanced from sticks, stones, and fire. Today, technology not only enables humanity to advance above the other animals, technology enables some humans to advance over others. Some hierarchies are technological. Humans are never equal, since nothing that is different can be equal. Some inequalities are natural. The child begins life much less developed than its parents. The man never possesses eggs. But some inequalities are technological. A fast runner is still slower than a vehicle, and a math problem is easier solved after it is written. Technology can force inequalities, and inequalities can create hierarchies. It is no coincidence that the leading nations of the world also lead in technology. You should acquaint yourself with all available technology to empower you. The 4 you should invest in now are language, money, machines, chemicals, and energy. You will understand language when you choose to be a polyglot, and you will understand money when you choose to be parsimonious. Machines are your sticks and stones, and chemicals and energy are your fire. Machine technology has far advanced in the last 500 years. The 6 classical simple machines, the lever, wheel, and axle, pulley, inclined plane, wedge and screw, no longer suffice to describe the machines humans have since developed. Today, machines enable international communications at the speed of light, human travel past the speed of sound, and digital paper accessible on computing devices around the world. Machines define the modern age, the industrial and post-industrial era. The value of machines cannot be overstated. As the 4 necessities are food, clothing, shelter, and consciousness, you should involve yourself in the operation of machines that fulfill these fundamental needs. Choice 12, be strategic, as the ignorant and dependent are easier to exploit. All warfare is based on deception. A Eurasian general, Sun Tzu, wrote that insight around 2,500 years ago. He further explained, when able to attack, we must seem unable; when using our forces, we must seem inactive; when we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away; when far away, we must make them believe we are near. This deception at its core relies on a basic flaw of humanity. We exist in 2 worlds, one real and one imagined, but the real is not always known. When humans do not know the real world, they imagine one. Knowing the real world and inspiring imaginary ones are twin pillars of strategy. Choose to be strategic. Understand that the ignorant and dependent are easier to exploit than the knowledgeable and independent. Obscuring knowledge and forcing dependence are common stratagems for exploitation. They can be observed in nearly all human endeavors. From religion to government, schools to work, marketing to dating, stratagems are not limited to war. To be strategic, you must understand stratagems and how they can benefit or harm you. Stratagems are the methods in which a person or a group of people position themselves to exploit others. The exploitation isn't always negative, but it's always done at the benefit of the strategists. Not all stratagems need to be or can be resisted, but understanding stratagems helps you to resist them or, when you can benefit, assist them. Many modern institutions are stratagems that have willing targets. You may participate in these institutions yourself. It is important, when you do, to understand the stratagem on at least 4 levels. Who are the strategists? What do they want? In what way are the targets ignorant or dependent, and how do the targets benefit? Religions are one of the most ubiquitous stratagems in the world, specifically in Africa, where, as recently as 2021, it was estimated that over 85% of Africans identified as either Christian or Muslim. True or otherwise, it's an interesting statistic considering the ultimate basis of those religions. Where modern science only suspects extraterrestrials, those religions don't only assert that they exist, but they claim to be in contact and have a contract with them. More peculiarly, the contract relates to a human afterlife, one of the least observable human experiences. The stratagem gives the strategists authority, but the basis of that authority is unprovable. Still, because so many Africans identify with these religions, it's important to analyze them. Firstly, who are the strategists? Christianity and Islam are 2 of 3 religions known as Abrahamic faiths. The 3 Judaism, Christianity and Islam were originally recorded between 4,000 and 1,000 years ago, Judaism being the oldest and Islam being the youngest. They are all Eurasian religions based in Eurasia and modified and maintained by a religious Eurasian elite. The Judaic elite are in Israel, the Christian elite are throughout Europe, and the Muslim elite are in Saudi Arabia. That said, what do they want? These elites have 2 major gains: authority and money. Authority is obvious. The control even local religious leaders have is legion, alleging to control the everlasting fate of a human makes the believer obedient. The money is less obvious. One of the reasons these Abrahamic faiths were so successful is because in their authority they demand taxes or tithes. Tithes, 10% of their followers' income, coupled with little overhead, oftentimes leads to huge profits for religious leaders, particularly when their following is large. The math is straightforward: 10% of 10 incomes is the average income, 10% of 30 is 3 times the average, and 10% of 200 is 20 times the average. Even in an impoverished area, 20 times the average income can be significant, especially there. Tithing, like taxes, is a mathematically sound method for wealth generation. Most communities could stand to benefit from a tax-like income directed at charity, industry, or job creation. In Islam, charity is the expressed purpose of their zakat. Nevertheless, the basis for this money collection is this contract with imaginary extraterrestrials. This creates an inherent waste of resources, time, energy, and money. Worse, these religions characterize non-believers as enemies who should be treated worse than believers. As incomplete examples, Judaism has its goyim, whom can be served rotten meat or charged usury. Its story starts with Abraham as an invader of Palestine. Christianity has its pagans whom they characterize as demon worshippers. Its defining moment was the Nicene Council, whose leader, Constantine, was inspired by In hoc signo vinces, or in this sign we conquer. Islam has its kafir, who are excluded from zakat, the charity, unless they can be converted, and whom can be enslaved. In many ways these religions are less about worship and more about worship. Many believers have been convinced to turn against their own race, ethnicities, and even families. Collectively, the three religions had significant roles in different conquests, crusades, colonizations, and jihads. Still, some targets of these religions believe they reap benefits. Besides from not being treated as non-believers, these religions incorrectly advise against racism and advocate an extreme gender asymmetry in family structure and community. As a stratagem, its reliance on an ignorance of history, astronomy, and biology make it hard to take seriously, yet its ubiquity and wealth generation have proven they are hard to ignore. Choice 13, be Mot, as Mot is war against Isfat and Isfat is war against Mot. Those who destroy the lie promote Mot, those who promote the good will erase the evil. As fullness casts out appetite, as clothes cover the nude, and as a beautiful sky clears up after a storm. Mot is a concept from an ancient African high culture. It is one of the oldest known moral philosophies. She is sometimes remembered as a personification, or NTR, of truth, order, and justice, but truth, order, and justice are subjective terms. Mot is only vaguely remembered, even her disciples are distant memories. Still, Mot is a profound concept that ancient Africans used for Ankh, Ajah, Snbnb, a mastery of life, wealth, and health. Ancient leaders, or NSWT, chose Mot, and would regularly declare Tulend Mot, Tush and Isfat, defend Mot, defeat Isfat. Isfat is the personification of lies, disorder, and injustice. Today's leaders can benefit from this same choice. Choose to be Mot. In the struggle between order and disorder, harmony and cacophony, Mot is war against Isfat and Isfat is war against Mot. This moral code produced one of the greatest civilizations known to humankind. Its guidance on reciprocity and exploitation makes it one of the keystones to a good productive life as well as a good legal code. The ancient KMTW, one of the original disciples of Mot, created countless artifacts on this moral code. They were a scientific people, and their spirituality, like many African spiritual systems, reflected their understanding of science. One frequent representation of Mot is the image of a person's heart on a scale weighed against Mot's feather. The object of this weighing was to denote how a person's heart should be light. If one's heart was as light as a feather, then that person was also balanced. This insight deserves examination. When a person feels that they've done wrong, their heart feels heavy. It's even the case that to be heavy-hearted is to feel sorrowful, sad, or overburdened. This is contrasted to light-heartedness, where one is jovial, carefree, and self-entertained. The ancients observed this physiological change and used it to craft an insightful narrative on an apparent inherent moral compass. Drawn to its natural conclusion, Mot served as a way to create jovial and balanced people, and particularly reciprocal and anti-exploitative societies. Reciprocity ranks among the most important human concepts. Reciprocity is an essence of mod. Reciprocity is giving and receiving in comparable measure. Its contrast is exploitation, taking in incomparable measure. To be mod is to be reciprocal, and to be isfit is to be exploitative. Human emotions are tied to their sense of reciprocity. We are born exploitative because we are born dependent. We are intrinsically light-hearted in our exploitation. Humans need socialization in order to function in societies where they must contribute. But this is where mass exploitation becomes a reality. Not everyone must contribute everywhere. Though some humans are socialized to be reciprocal with nature, most humans exploit animals, plants, and insects, especially insofar as they take life but do not give life. To some humans, the exploitation of animals does not stop at humans. Race, class, and gender have been historical rationale for exploitation. In Eurasia, it has become epidemic. It's worthwhile in understanding mod to recognize that what to be reciprocal with and what to be exploitative of is socially determined. In KMT there were 42 confessions of mod. These 42 confessions can inform how we can be reciprocal today. Choice 14, be scientific, as knowledge and science are the weapons against ignorance and pseudoscience. There are two types of energies, kinetic and potential. One is present and real. One is future and imaginary. They describe the scientific perspective. The present serves to imagine the future based on the past. The past was real, the present is real, and the future is imagined. Knowledge is an awareness of the past and the present. Science is an awareness of the probable future. The scientific deal in probability. The unscientific don't. Because humans are born ignorant, with no awareness of the past and a limited awareness of the present, a human may become knowledgeable. The means to knowledge is observation and education. Only through knowledge can science be pursued. Without knowledge, pseudoscience is the refuge of humans. Choose to be scientific, as knowledge and science are the weapons against ignorance and pseudoscience. The 10 virtues, the 7 liberal arts, and the study of genders are 3 resources for the development of a scientific mind. In being scientific, you must also develop BOCO, institutions for community education. The 10 virtues and the 7 liberal arts are articulated by George G. M. James in Stolen Legacy. He reasons that they were a part of the ancient Nile Valley's educational system, an ancient center for an African high culture. If you understand ancient African spirituality as ancient Africanized sciences, you can see how the 10 virtues foster a scientific mind. He lists the 10 virtues with spirituality replaced with sciences as follows: control of thoughts, control of actions, steadfastness of purpose, identity with a scientific life, evidence of having a mission, evidence of a call to a scientific order, freedom from resentment when under experience of persecution and wrong, confidence in the power of a master, as an educator, confidence in one's own ability to learn, readiness or preparedness for initiation. It's reasoned that these 10 virtues were requirements for admission into ancient KMTW schools, entire cities of educators and students. The first 2, control of thoughts and control of actions, instruct on self-control and discipline. Being able to control oneself is fundamental in being a recipient of education. Similarly, being unable to control oneself means an educator shouldn't attempt. Steadfastness of purpose also informs why one should be a recipient of an education. A lack of steadfastness informs why one should not. Identity with a scientific life reinforces that purpose and reasons why one should receive a scientific education. An identity with a non-scientific life illustrates why one shouldn't. Evidence of having a mission and evidence of a call to a scientific order both supplement why one should receive a scientific education. Without a mission, one should not receive an advanced education, and without that call being to science, that education shouldn't be scientific. Freedom from resentment when under experience of persecution and wrong are another example of self-control and also mod. Being able to be balanced and even-tempered. through hardships makes for someone who can endure the most rigorous educational techniques. Seeing as those ancient schools also engaged in bodily asceticism and many African schools encouraged corporal punishment, or even educational punishments like extended reading and study, this quality does reinforce whether a person should receive an education. Confidence in the knowledge of an educator and confidence in one's own ability to learn are two more qualities one should have to receive an education. A lack of confidence in one's teacher or a lack of confidence in oneself should turn away an educator. Lastly, and generally, a readiness or preparedness for education should determine whether one receives an advanced education. Otherwise, and this is the caveat, one should be educated to receive an preparatory education or led to other pursuits. So those who lack the 10 virtues can either learn them before their study of the sciences or never learn the sciences. Before learning the sciences, a student must also study the 7 liberal arts and the 2 genders. These 9 total are listed as follows: grammar, rhetoric, logic, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, music, masculinity, femininity. The 7 liberal arts are also foundational to a scientific education and should be instructed in every boko across the world. Grammar enables a person to communicate effectively and review effective communications. Fundamentally, humans are social beings, so good grammar is fundamental to success in all aspects of life. Rhetoric encourages a person to communicate persuasively. A scientist is a specialist, is a leader. Rhetoric is charm, the sister to discipline. There is little reason to advance a person in science who cannot lead others. It can work for other leaders, but such a flaw will set a person up for exploitation. Though the West does find great success in this method, the greatest success in humans is found when a person is well-rounded and free. Logic instructs on how to discern reality from fantasy. Several logical fallacies should be common knowledge among every boko. Moreover, logic gates are the bedrock of computer sciences, one of the more advanced branches of science and specialty today. Geometry opens the mind to spatial thinking just as arithmetic offers numerical thinking. These fields are broad, but a rudimentary understanding of shapes and numbers will serve any scientific discipline well. Astronomy is itself a science, but perhaps the most compelling and necessary of them all. It's reason that human civilization itself begins among the human pioneers of astronomy in the Mountain of the Moon among the TWA in Uganda. It is the oldest science, and awareness of the cosmos already serves humans to no end. Our days are based around the sun, our months, the moon, and our years, the revolution of the earth. Music is the final liberal art. Perhaps the most neglected today, depending on where you are. George G. M. James communicates how music was discovered long ago to be therapeutic. We humans also react well to music, and it can help improve or even lessen our mood. Every boko should be a center for music along with a center of grammar. It cannot be denied that music has played a role in our conditioning for better or worse. Masculinity and femininity complete an individual's basic training. These teach a man or woman how to protect each other, how to nurture each other, how to survive with each other, and how to pleasure each other. Even individuals who do not pursue the advanced sciences should learn how to cohabit with their sexual complements. It's the responsibility of a community to educate people on their gendered expectations. Choice 15, be specialized as the specialists rule while the generalists are ruled. Boko, Wayzet Na Crew is an ancient yet common blueprint for power explained in the Book of Power by Onitaset Kumat. Boko is an institution for secondary education, Wayzet is an institution for tertiary education, and Crew is a network of educated professionals. It has been this way since the dawn of history. Educated professionals underwent exclusive specializations to preside over populations as far back as ancient KMT. It is by this blueprint that most nations are relevant. Human societies can organize in diverse ways, but when humans are trained to specialize in diverse but coordinated scientific endeavors, the whole of their society stands to benefit, particularly their specialists who will informally and formally rule. Choose to be specialized. In the most powerful nations, the specialists rule while the generalists are ruled. This is so across socio-economical and political ideologies. The Book of Power outlines the 16 specializations in a way that census, governance, foreign policy, transportation, banking, civil engineering, military engineering, trade, pure sciences, monument building, military strategy, practical sciences, propaganda, BOCO development, WayZet development, and crew development. Specialize and be an asset in at least one. In the Book of Power, census is matters of record keeping on a variety of metrics. A nation must know its population and measure and act accordingly. Governance is matters of law and jurisprudence. A nation needs governors, particularly if MOT isn't perfectly practiced. Foreign policy is matters of outside nations. As long as there are other nations, a nation will need foreign policy makers. It's government for the ungoverned. This includes but isn't limited to making war, making peace, forming alliances, crafting or revisiting treaties, kwk. Transportation is matters of moving people and products. A nation must concern itself with easing transportation within and without its borders. Banking is matters of resources and credit. A nation needs to regulate its own credit system and control and value its own resources and system of exchange. Civil engineering is matters of non-military engineering. A nation needs engineers for civil concerns. This includes but isn't limited to chemical, computer, electrical, infrastructural, naval, mining, nuclear, solar, civil, mechanical, mechatronic, kwk. Military engineering is matters of military engineering. A nation needs engineers to build its own weaponry. This includes but isn't limited to armaments, tanks, ships, airplanes, drones, satellites, kwk. Trade is matters of trading goods and services domestic and foreign. A nation regulates its own trade and taxes accordingly. Pure sciences is matters of investigating reality for knowledge. A nation needs to operate on reality. This includes but isn't limited to physics, biology, chemistry, geology, cosmology, astrophysics, quantum mechanics, biochemistry, mathematics, kwk. Monument building is matters of monuments building. A nation should be NFR and our ancestors must be heralded. Military strategy is matters of strategic warfare. A nation must prepare its own generals and either aggress or defend itself on the wisdom of proven strategies and their derivatives. Practical sciences is matters of practical knowledge. A nation has practical needs. This includes but isn't limited to medicine, agriculture, architecture, textiles, kwk. Propaganda is matters of defining allies and enemies and entertainment. A nation has a need to promote for its population a clear image of who we are and who we are against. This includes but isn't limited to authors, poets, filmmakers, podcasters, radio hosts, bloggers, video games, entertainment, sculptors, kwk. BOCO development is matters of BOCO development. A nation needs to deal with developing its common secondary education. This will be a refinement on BOCO, its curriculum and pedagogy. WayZet development is matters of WayZet development. A nation needs to deal with developing its elite tertiary education. This will be a refinement on WayZet, its curriculum and pedagogy. Crew development is matters of crew development. A nation needs to deal with connecting, sustaining, and developing its elites over class. A BOCO prepares students and selects the best for WayZet. WayZet prepares students and selects the best for crew. Invest in and develop BOCO and WayZet to improve your chosen nations. Census has a long-standing importance in human societies and development. While seemingly a practical science, it is more knowledge than science. A census is a collection of measured data on a given population, and the process of collection and measurement is often rigorous and time-consuming, but instructive and valuable. Humans often live in large areas, spread out from one another while maintaining individual mysteries to strangers. Census takers try to reduce that mystery and centrally compile it with minimal overlap and maximum meaning. Measurements census may collect our population, age, gender, ethnicity, race, tribe, housing, education, employment, income, and health, On a broad scale, these can instruct on what infrastructure are needed or how a society is developing based on older census. For example, population indicates the need for communication and transportation. It reveals population density and may suggest the type of residential, commercial, or industrial focus an area can support. It's also an important metric for financial needs. Cities of 30 people may have different needs from cities of 8 million people, although 30 astronauts and 30 farmers have different needs as well, so census takes into account other demographics. Age informs on the need of educational institutions, employment opportunities, or retirement homes. The generally younger population may need playgrounds and schools, where a generally older population may need nursing homes and hospitals. Age distribution shifts every year, with every new birth, new death, and new year, but gathering this data and building ahead of time can maximize a population's happiness. Gender is another important metric that can influence immigration needs. Generally, humans are roughly balanced between men and women. After wars, epidemics, or even mass imprisonment, the population can skew to one gender or another. A rough balance with a slight edge toward women may be ideal for societal growth and maintenance. A population poorly out of balance can be tuned with the immigration of men or women of qualified stock. This informs policy and the development of embassies and introductory and ethnic facilities. Ethnicity, race, and tribe are similar informative metrics, particularly as objectively a society may strive toward a monoethnic makeup, especially if that ethnicity is more behavioral than genetic. How ethnicity is distributed can promote state-sanctioned ethnic institutions, and even inform on policing as necessary. A sometimes uncomfortable truism. Housing hints at living conditions and guides an overclass in where to develop and why. Areas with high homelessness may need special attention even greater than homes, whereas areas with ostentatious housing may require an accessible airport or luxury mall. A part of the nationalist agenda is universal electrification, yet humans may choose to live far apart from one another and even off the grid. The availability of electricity and its uses informs on the power needs of a people, both present and future. Access to clean water is another necessity to evaluate under housing. The need for electricity and clean water further informs the need for civil engineers and metals and materials for these projects. Education levels are important too. Areas with low literacy may require many more schools and more efficient teachers, where areas with high literacy may actually serve as templates across a nation. What's more, as education should serve as a character builder, education signifies the general behavior of a people, and when it aligns positively with desired behavior, the curriculum should be reinforced, and when it doesn't, it can be questioned. Employment and income are two of those positive metrics that should align with education, particularly when employment and income are lawful. How and where a people are employed speaks to their collective needs too. The fastest internet speeds may be more suitable to those with the greatest internet traffic, and how and why roads are laid always relates to how much street traffic and profit is generated by each thoroughfare. Health is another metric worth collecting. It can speak toward diseases, but also wealth, athleticism, weight, height, and fecundity. Health also signifies access to health care and a well-rounded diet. It is documented in Ethiopia Oriental, 1622, that in pre-colonial Mwinumu-Tapa, Zimbabwe, the age of mortality was commonly between 90 and 100 years. In the History of Herodotus Volume 1, Herodotus learned that the age of mortality commonly past 120 years in ancient Kinsu, Ethiopia. The age of mortality is rarely that high in modern Western nations and usually much lower in post-colonial Africa, despite that Africans were once well known as long-lived Ethiopians. A census on health can inform where and why humans live longer and study and standardize their life patterns for general longevity everywhere. Census is invaluable toward improving the lives of humans. It is an incredibly important specialization that many other specializations stand to benefit from. Choice 16, be elitist, as the solution is a global fellowship of Africanist magnates. A wise person is a school for the magnates, and those who are aware of his knowledge do not attack him. The NSWT, king, Kiti Yasaba instructed his son Marikare on many profound wisdoms, and this one greatly enlightens. Just as today, the ancient world had magnates, people of great consequence, who could even attack kings and queens. Kiti warned his son to be wise as a protection from assault. Considering that Kiti was possibly then the most individually powerful human on earth, as NSWT of KMT, it's a stark reminder that true power lies in the elites of a society collectively. So choose to be elitist. But not just any sort of elitist. Elites can be both the solution and the problem, so above all be wise, as Kiti warned, and in turn Africanist, as what amounts to wisdom is often what benefits a people the most. Boko, Wazet Na Crew is the shorthand for the solution is a global fellowship of Africa First magnates. When an elite is oriented toward their continent, they advance a nation like no other. For Africa these elites are Crew. Boko, Wazet Na Crew, the model for Pan-African unity, is a short essay in the Book of Power. Read it. Following are 7 excerpts and an explanation. Nothing works in theory, all that works, works in works. Action is the instrument of accomplishment. Boko, Wazet Na Crew is the action of Pan-African unity. The most important division you must make is between reality and fantasy. Nothing works in theory is a reminder that fantasizing isn't work. Fantasy can aid in work, but fantasy in and of itself isn't work. The only work is work, reality is the only reality, all that matters is matter. Many will try to convince you that fantasy is work, theory is work, words are work. These are not. Work is work. Between thoughts and action, taking action is how one accomplishes anything. Boko, Wazet Na Crew is also introduced here. Boko is secondary education, the education following a primary education, our primary education being the one we receive from our parents and caretakers. This essay goes into more detail on the Boko's 4 major purposes. Wazet is tertiary education, the education following a secondary education. Only a select few should attain this education, those few should be exceptionally scholastic and loyal to our race. Crew is the fellowship of graduates, the fraternity and sorority of Africanist, Africa-oriented, specialized magnates. It is the general term for Makru and Matkaru, ancient titles for those who achieved excellence in education, meaning true of voice for men and women respectively. Highly racially educated fraternities and sororities unite every other united people. The work to unity is the work for highly racially educated fellowships. There are 2 types of people in any population, elites and commoners. What constitutes a nation, even in ancient times, is its elite group and their literacy and intelligence. A nation is a mutual aid society for racial elites. What makes KMT different, eventually, is the training of its elites is racially exclusive and open to commoners but secretive. That is, after the Old Kingdom falls, KMT is restored in the Middle Kingdom, but its capital is moved to ancient Wazet, the meaning of which is the city of was, the city of power. Here, Wazipatestu, the most select of places, the main temple in a temple complex where Africans learned the old ways of Kinsu in the worship of Amun, the methods of governance and the pure and practical sciences, and, over 40 years, trained to be the near-omniscient professional elites of KMT. This is the model Ankobia emulate. Choice 17, be studied as there are 13 months, 13 territories, 13 nations, and 13 books. Roughly speaking, there are 365.25 days in a year. 365 can be divided into 13 months of 28 days with a remainder of 1, 12 months of 30 days with a remainder of 5, or 12 months of 28 to 31 days with no logical pattern. The last is surprisingly popular, but the 2 others offer a greater uniformity and consistency depending on the length of a week. In the case of a week being 7 days, the 13-month pattern is superior, and given that a woman's period may on average be 28 days, it aligns best with the human anatomy and the revolution of the moon. but in the case of a week being 10 days, the 12 months of 30 days is preferred. A 10-day orientation also aligns with human anatomy inasmuch as humans have 10 fingers and 10 toes. It also makes for a longer week and is more consistent with an ancient African calendar and the phases of the moon. Whether the 28-day calendar or the 30-day one, there are technically 13 months. You should read, reread, and discuss a certain book each month, that is, choose to be studied. There are 13 months, 13 territories, 13 nations, and 13 books to study every year. The 13 books mentioned in the Book of Power will be revised a little here, the 13 nations remain the same. In the Book of Power the 10-day week is adopted. Each day was meant to be something meaningful like day of production or day of formation, an idea itself adopted from Zuberi, and the Maroons of Ma. A typical month had special days of Jumamosi to Jumakumi, and the last month, the 5-day month, Mwezi wa Ma, had 5, or 6, days of Jamankobia. Each month was named after a different African nation of the past, 3 near each major African river in each corner of Africa, the Nile, the Niger, the Zambezi, and the Congo. The reasoning here was that an African should study and celebrate each region of Africa, especially the best we've produced, especially to be able to produce better, and of course rivers and bodies of water are of utmost importance, historically and at present, they are even featured prominently in many libation practices. Every month, starting with Zimbabwe, on July 27, had an associated book to read and discuss. As listed in the Book of Power we had Zimbabwe and Zuberi, and the Maroons of Ma, Mutapa and the pro-black compendium, Basotho and wonderful Ethiopians of the ancient Kushite Empire, Kinsu and the destruction of black civilization, Punt and Message to the People, Carthage and the Carlos A. Cook's Reader, Sao and Race First, Lunda and African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, 2780 to 330 BC, Ndongo and Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, Knock and the Book of Power. Benin and Onitaset, Ghana and the Art of War, and Ma and THTP. Although each book can still be read, except Onitaset which never existed, a different set of 13 books should be read annually. For instance, Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare is too good to exclude for The Art of War, another book that didn't exist. Asia, Sun Tzu, has one and Europe, Machiavelli, has one but Africa doesn't. Why you should read the 13 books will be shown. Firstly, why you should study each nation. Great Zimbabwe is the first nation to study each year. Located in present-day Zimbabwe in southern Africa, it was the land of stone and cattle. This was a colossal stonework dating as far back as the 14th century CE. It was a fortress of nearly 12 buildings covering over 8 square kilometers with some of its walls as high as 10 meters and as thick as 5. It had drains and dados and at its peak had a population of at least 18,000. Two of its more famous constructs are the temple, a conical tower, and the Acropolis, a turreted castle structure nearby. The name Zimbabwe is Shona, Zimbabwe, for Great Revered House. The construction technique used in Great Zimbabwe was largely dry stone walling and crushed granite cement, a Shona tradition that outlasts many contemporary techniques. It had many cottages and was largely a residential fortress. Unlike most other cities, Great Zimbabwe wasn't focused on commercialism or industrialism, but more enclosed people and livestock. It had warehouses and shrines and normal footpaths to each cottage. Despite this, it was a trading hub in classical Africa. Trade goods as far as Persia, China, and Syria were found in its collection, as well as divers locally manufactured goods of bronze, iron, copper, and gold. Much evidence survives of the industry of Zimbabwe, from their crucibles and tools for drawing metal, the remains of their furnaces and soapstone, their terracotta figurines of cattle and carvings of stylized birds and their spindle whorls showing their manufacture of cotton clothing. Zimbabwe presents itself as a case study to pre-colonial Africa. People living together and profiting from their hard work. Industry, location, and trading acumen. it is a reminder to choose a community of great people to be great. Choice 18, be polyglot as Kiankobia, or Kiswahili, can unite and advance Africa. If one were to summarize the history of human progress, language could reasonably be the primary driving force. Not only does our language separate us from most of the animal kingdom, but oral and literal histories remain the fundamental tools for intergenerational knowledge. One of the most profound texts in history was that of Timaeus by Plato, although it has its historical flaws as a philosophical and propagandist text. It documents an encounter between an unnamed ancient African scholar and Solon, one of the 7 sages of ancient Greece, a founder of Western democracies and one of the wisest men of the earliest known learned European nation. The scholar tells Solon, "You Greeks are perennial infants, not a single Greek is an elder," and informs Solon that ancient Egyptians can recall 9,000 years of history in their books, their institutions, laws, and brilliant accomplishments, while no European possesses ancient knowledge, because whenever a great flood occurs, only their crude mountain dwellers survive, a fate Egypt was spared from, despite seeing many floods. It was Egypt's language and literacy which made it an elder nation, with knowledge spanning millennia. It's actually Egypt's cosmological measurements which are used in modern astronomy. But history doesn't end in Egypt, rather Egypt is eventually conquered by Assyrians, who are conquered by Greeks, who are conquered by Romans, who are conquered by Arabs. This resulted in a transfusion of knowledge to where most of Western sciences derive from Muslim scholarship, a development out of Egypt. The Arabs conquer and enslave the Europeans in Al-Andalus for 700 years. After they are defeated, the Portuguese and Spaniards assume their knowledge and become the first European superpowers, suddenly equipped with firearms, large ships, and ancient maps. When the Spanish Armada falls to Britain and France then take the global superpower mantle, and eventually at the turn of World War II, America surpasses them, followed by the megalith socialist states of Russia and China. Remnants of Egypt exists throughout this world history. America's founders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson have memorial sites decorated with Tekhenu and other ancient Egyptian iconography. A greatly important development for Europe, however, was its use of Latin as an intellectual and scientific language. In this, Portugal and Spain weren't the only beneficiaries of Arabic/Egyptian knowledge, and having an international, intracontinental community of scientific and intellectual exchange, made Europe, formerly on par with the rest of the world, exceed them in science and engineering. Isaac Newton, considered a founder of calculus and physics ideas, has popularly studied Egyptian texts to better understand the universe, as did Johannes Kepler and many others. The dual understanding of Egyptian language and the understanding of its translation in Latin united and excelled Europe. So choose to be a polyglot. As Kiankobia, or Kiswahili, can unite and advance Africa in the same way that Latin advanced Europe or Mandarin advances Asia. Why Kiankobia or Kiswahili is straightforward. The case for Kiankobia begins with what is Kiankobia. Kiankobia means language of the Ankobia, where Ankobia is the highest stage of African consciousness. The language doesn't exist as of yet, but all languages are created, and it is the responsibility of every people to maintain and propagate a language for their collective benefit. For Kiankobia, the concern is less whether we need a language but how to construct one. The proposal for Kiankobia is to use the 13 nations as a guide along with Kiswahili. The people of Zimbabwe, Mutapa, Basotho, Kansu, Punt, Carthage, Sao, Lunda, Ndongo, Nok, Benin, Ghana, and Ma had a language. Kiankobia should be the studied synergy of at least 14 languages across different regions of Africa. This is unlike proposing a modern or ancient language. For one, actual languages in Africa will always be limited and never be as Pan-Africanists. Every language is regional at best. But on the other hand, this method allows for a language across space and time while being purely African. This effort can be facilitated by scholars and linguists, but also machines, along with reintroducing the MDWNTR script. The scope of the creation of a language, however, is beyond individual effort. This should be the pursuit of a nation or a university. Without those, Kiswahili is the second best option. Whichever, the classics of world arts and sciences should be translated into either. That is what Latin did and what Mandarin did, but not what any African language has yet done. Kiswahili is a trade language in Eastern Africa. Its grammar is African, but it comprises many loan words and is very minimalist in accommodating foreign words, preferring to simply add vowels at the end. It also doesn't have an indigenous script, going from Arabic script to now Latin. Nevertheless, it's considered an easy language to learn. It's the official language in several countries including Nigeria's Tanzania, and it's the most widely spoken African language in the world. Kiswahili is a language you should learn, but not at the detriment of knowing other African languages. Your studies should be to be a polyglot as well as to be able to communicate science and philosophy in the most widely spoken African language. Kiswahili's use of foreign words is understandable, as even English's vocabulary is predominantly loan words, but this overuse also lends to Kiswahili's malleability. Excising foreign words from Kiswahili is an achievable task. If not replacing them in the Kiankobia scheme, Kiswahili can adopt its own language or its relatives to create words, another task outside of an individual's scope. At present, Tanzania is increasingly adding words into the Kiswahili vocabulary. Positioning yourself to add to Kiswahili is exactly how to improve the language. Without Kiankobia, it's important to translate certain scientific and artistic works into Kiswahili. There are 30 subject matters that every library or bookstore should propagate in Kiswahili and the local African language. Choice 19, be colonial, as even KMT was a colony of Kinsu. Pan-Africanism is one of the great pseudosciences, a fantasy in the miraculous but inevitable total unity of the African continent. Two of its greatest proponents are Nkrumah and Nyerere. Nkrumah envisioned a rapid establishment of a federated Africa, where Nyerere calculated a more regional and practical approach. Nyerere's view was more valid but invalid: Africa will never be united, unless Africa colonizes Africa. Every other conclusion is ahistorical and baseless. No continent except Australia is united entirely. The second closest and a model for Nkrumah's United States of Africa is North America's United States of America, itself one of the largest and most violent colonial projects in the world, Australia being another. Other grand models like the European Union or China are not total for Europe or Asia, and their unity is fundamentally rooted in economics, a unity possible in Africa only through colonization. Some would reason that KMT is a model for Pan-Africanism. It's not, as it was not the total unity of the African continent. But on a microscale it signifies something important. It is understood to be 42 different ethnic groups, as nomes, living under one monarch, an ancient federation that called itself the Black Community. But KMT, along with most historical examples, inform why you should choose to be colonial. Colonialism is the key to unity, as KMT was one of the greatest examples of black unity, yet even KMT was a colony of Kinsu. The only other great scheme of unity in Africa is what's known as the Bantu migrations. Though not universally accepted, the theory is that a group of Iron Age agriculturalist Africans spread across Africa, and the supporting evidence is several languages having similar terms related to smelting and agriculture. They were not centralized or colonialists though, so though many Africans may allegedly share ancestry or benefit from this cultural diffusion, we weren't united when we needed to be. If the Bantu were colonial, Africa may have never been colonized from the outside. Colonialism is the political formation which protects against colonialism. Colonialism protects against colonialism is valid throughout history. A colonizer protects what's theirs. The disdained Berlin Conference was an agreement between European colonizers to no longer intrude on each other's colonies. Before that, the Europeans would fight one another in the defense of their colonies. This fight was largely economically beneficial. Economics is the prime motivator of human activity and the principal reason for colonialism. It was the riches gained through colonialism that enabled Europeans to defend against Europeans and overcome African states. An Africa that uses its resources to defend its resources is the only Africa that can defend Africa. The example of this Africa being a continental federation, regional federations, disconnected nations, or being a colonizer lends solely to the last. The economic imperative is utmost to political unity. It is fantasy to think nations defend nations without an economic incentive. It's nonsensical to think many human lives will be risked in war without some greater opportunity for the survivors. It's not without irony that Nkrumah himself, a masterful leader in Ghana, was undermined and exiled on the rationale that he was sending Ghana's military mindlessly in the Congo. If Ghana had colonized Congo, however, and Congo contributed greatly to Ghana's wealth, Nkrumah and Lumumba would have remained in power. It's important, of course, when discussing colonialism that we recognize that colonies too can benefit from colonialism. The only reason the colonization of Africa by Europeans didn't benefit the Africans greatly is because of the racism of Europeans against Africans, a perennially valid logic for Europeans as they have no responsibility to develop Africa. Colonialism, however, can develop Africa. The colonialism you should exercise is one that mutually benefits African colonies. This is the only logical Pan-Africanism and is more suitably called Pan-African nationalism. It's only the empowerment of an African nation to develop its neighbors and interests in a mutually beneficial manner that can grant the greatest benefit, protection in Africa. Colonialism is the centralization of defense, and centralized defenses are the most powerful that humans have mustered. If an African state received resources in exchange for collective defense, the investment is justified and spreads peace throughout Africa. Without colonization, those that can defend cannot afford to defend. Defense is one of the most costly investments. It costs lives and money where most investments may only cost money. The African intent on Africa's development should choose one nation and support its expansion and colonialism. The only fault is when colonial African states engage other colonial African states, a fault rectifiable by the crew. Choice 20. Be charming, as charm is easy to acquire and fundamental to social success. There are 10 qualities that everyone can develop daily to substantively improve their lives: strength, physique, agility, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, discipline, charm, fortune, and fame. To have these 10 in abundance is to navigate life at an advantage. The strong, fit, agile, dexterous, intelligent, wise, disciplined, charming, fortunate and famous person can compete against most in most things, but becoming such a person is easier said than done. To be strong, fit, agile and dexterous would require frequent physical conditioning. To be intelligent and wise requires extensive studies. To be fortunate and famous requires an accommodating society, but to be disciplined and charming requires little. Discipline is the ability to commit oneself to a task. Charm is the ability to commit others to a task. You should seek to be all 10, but especially choose to be charming. Charm is easy to acquire and, along with fortune and fame, fundamental to social success. Sell more, date more, be more, win more. The top 20 best tips to become more persuasive in the Pro-Black Compendium provides 20 excellent tips to be more charming. Together, you can assist in increasing your life, wealth, and health. Tip 1. Be perceived as giving more than you are perceived to receive. There are 2 things you want to be perceived as: a giver and an appreciator of givers. The world comprises givers and takers. A taker is almost always reprimanded, avoided, or scorned, but givers are cherished and other givers want them to be receivers. The easiest way to be accepted as a giver is to be perceived as one. You may think being a giver is the easier way, but understand that you can be a giver and be perceived as a taker. In being charming and therefore committing others to tasks, you need to stress what you're giving versus what you'd receive. This is utmost. A job description stresses the applicant's salary and benefits, not the applicant's profitability or investor earnings. Similarly, the applicant stresses how they profited their earlier positions and how they can profit, not their accidents, mistakes, or flaws. At its core, this tip emphasizes the Mot view of reciprocity, giving and receiving in comparable measure. Emphasizing your giving character and seeming to appreciate and reward givers can increase your status among givers, and your life, wealth, and health will improve. Tip 2, speak as I directly to you. You are the subject of your existence. Your favorite book isn't amazing, rather, you are amazed by your favorite book. The lecture isn't insightful, rather, you appreciate the insights from the lecturer. A room isn't large, rather, you like the size of a room. When you speak to charm someone, speak as yourself and for yourself. Make yourself important and you will be perceived as important. Similarly, speak directly to who you're engaging. Don't say your hair is beautiful but I think you have beautiful hair. The former is nice and acceptable, but the latter is confident and assertive. To be important enough to commit others to tasks, you should present yourself as important enough. Practice I want you, I need you and I think you phrases. This tip parallels voice tips in writing. There's an active voice and a passive voice. Just as in writing, you want to avoid a passive voice, in speaking especially charming you want to avoid being indirect or speaking for others. Even when you speak for your organization, occasionally include yourself in the discourse. You are important. You are the leader. I think so, so you should too. Do you see what was done there? Choice 21, be tribal as unity isn't even desirable unless you can recognize and reward your kin. Organization advantages its membership, otherwise it's disorganization. There is no reason to be organized unless you receive an advantage in organizing. There will be no unity between people until there is an advantage to it. Tribalism is often a sore subject among African people. It is reasoned that tribalism is a major source of internal conflict. This is a mistaken point of view. Tribalism has always been a major source of internal and external cohesion. It was exploited, but with or without tribes, humans are exploited. Tribes are kinship groups, in both biology and philosophy. To have a tribe is to have a history, and to have brothers and sisters, related by blood or mentality. More importantly, to have a tribe is to have an established leadership. All tribes are social inventions for social cohesion and social leadership. Being old doesn't make an elder, being old and in line with the tribe makes an elder. Choose to be tribal to truly be united with your brothers and sisters. As unity isn't even desirable unless you can recognize and reward your kin, and your kin is who you consider to be your kin. Africa will always be tribal just as Europe and Asia remain tribal. The tribe that Africans should unite with is the Ankobia. To unite under the highest African consciousness is the means by which Africa will transcend. There are 4 stages to African consciousness: the Askari, the activist, the astute and the Ankobia. The Askari are the Africans who actively betray Africa. They do the bidding of the Eurasian, seek exploitation or promote isfit in place of Mot. The activist are the Africans who seek reforms from Eurasians or reforms like Eurasians. They are not Africa-minded, but they also aren't workers for Eurasians. The astute are the Africans who gain some understanding of Mot, Africa, or Ankobia. They are still in their theory life and also aren't workers. They can return to activism at any moment or stay in studies indefinitely. They are not useful to the Africa cause. The Ankobia, however, are the workers of Africa, the performers for Mot, and those who exercise the 21 choices for Ank, Adja, SNB. It is easiest to determine an African stage by 2 questions: are you Africa first, and are you a worker or a worder? The Askari is the worker who isn't Africa first, the activist is the worder who isn't Africa first, the astute is the worder who is Africa first, the Ankobia is the worker who is Africa first. Every African tribe and ethnicity has all 4 stages. Only the Ankobia seek to be led by only the Ankobia. Historic Ankobia are Akampong, Enzingha, Taharka and Garvey. Their example of working and Africa first are the examples Ankobia all over should understand. Akampong is commonly known as Queen Nanny to most, especially the Africans in Jamaica, where she is a national hero. She is one of the 3 tribal heroes of the Anko-Biatu. It is speculated that she was Ghanaian royalty, but whatever the case, this was a woman who met the misfortune of a brutal slavery in Jamaica head-on, escaped from it with her brothers and sisters, then formed a community of Africans committed to living as they did in Africa. Many Caribbean maroon villages, including her own, are hardly distinguishable from villages in Africa, except sometimes the language and available foods. She however didn't only command a village, she commanded an army. Mostly engaging guerrilla warfare, Akampong not only fought the British who wished to re-enslave her, but also attacked plantations to free other Africans enslaved by the British. She fought so long and hard, eventually the British had to call for a cessation of hostility. Astutes disagree in her village's agreement, some say even she did too, but for risking her life for over a decade for Africans across tribal boundaries to live a free life as she did in Africa, Akampong is an Anko-Biatu to emulate.